God is good. We're going to worship Him, give Him praise today. Real quick before we want to invite you guys, just turn to those around you, welcome them to church. Say good morning to somebody. Shake a hand, grab a hug, tell somebody you're glad to see them.
God who's never late is working
Some of you today have come here, you can relate to that last lyric that we just sang. You feel like you're in the valley. You feel like God is distant. Maybe you even feel like you don't belong here, like you're not worthy to be here. One of the things I love about our God, the God that we serve, is that He loves us and He meets us more than halfway. Glad you're here today. Maybe you feel like you came in stumbling. I kind of like that. We're all just people who are stumbling towards Jesus. When we're unable to stand on our own, He lifts us up. Let Him put the breath in your lungs today and give you the ability to sing. Place your trust in Him, put your dependence on Him. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. Let's lift our voices and sing. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. You give life, you are love, you bring light to the darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that is broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, we pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise, pour out our praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out our praise to you only. Every knee shall bow, every tongue will confess. Let's sing together. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great are you, Lord. And all the earth will shout your praise. Our hearts will cry, these bones will sing. Great moments we feel distant from you, draw near us. For the moments we don't feel like you're nearby, remind us that you're there. For you're a great God, and you desire to dwell among your people. Lead our hearts back to you.
A song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within, through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made. And it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. God, our hearts back to you today. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. Yeah, it's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
Lift your voice.
I'm coming back to the heart of worship. It's all about you. Yes, it is, God. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it. It's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
Lord, it is all about you. When we make things about us, man, we're missing out on all that you have to offer. Lord, we're encouraged that you still love us. You've got grace for us even in our brokenness. I can't think of a better example than the love you displayed for us on the cross. Your love so great. How could you not be drawn to it? God, you're good, you're mighty, you're faithful. Place our trust in you today as we remember you during this time of communion. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen. Lord, give to us freely, and as we receive the offering today, I pray that you would continue just to support the mission of this church. Lord, you're doing great things here, and we're thankful for that. It's in Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Well, good morning. We are certainly glad you guys are with us today, and especially if today is your very first time with us, we're honored that you would be a part of our service. And if today is your first time, I would encourage you, there's a card in the jacket pocket in that seat right in front of you. It says belong on it. If you wouldn't mind pulling that out and take a couple of seconds to fill out that information. At the end of the service, as you're heading out into the lobby, you'll see a wall that says Next Steps. Our Next Steps team will be out there, and we would just love to meet you and introduce ourselves. And if today's your first time with us, we got a little gift. Thank you for coming. But we are always excited when someone wants to share a little bit about themselves, and we want to get you connected. And if you've been coming for a while and you really haven't filled one of these out and you're ready to be known, man, we'd love to meet you today and hear your story. So if you want to drop by and see us after service, we'd love to talk with you. Over the next week, especially next week, you'll start hearing the phrase, I'm in. And we're making a little service campaign. You know, one of our three major roots to our vision, you know, we talk about reaching out to God, reaching out, growing strong, and giving back. And part of being a member of Fairdale Christian Church, part of being a member of this community is serving. It's part of our DNA is to serve, not only here on this campus, but throughout this south end of Louisville and even beyond. And I'll talk about that in just a second. But we would love for you to get plugged in. You know, if you've been coming for a while, you're like, I'm ready to be known. I want to start doing stuff. Well, I'm in. You start looking for that. There'll be some information about it next week, and we'll show you some steps that you can take to get plugged in. We'll show you some areas of service that we would love to have some new people in, and it's all over across the board. There's stuff that you can do around the grounds. There's stuff you can do in the classrooms, in the nurseries. There's stuff that you can do downtown at some of our mission partners, Celebrate Recovery. There's all kinds of ways you can get involved. So start looking for I'm in and start praying today about what you want to do and where you feel like God has been leading you. And this is kind of leads into the next thing. Brandon last week, if you were here at the beginning of his sermon, said something about a short-term mission trip to Honduras. It's a medical mission. It'll be happening in 2020. And we're looking for some folks who want to go. And if you hear medical and you think, well, I'm not in the health profession, that's okay. There's all kinds of things you can do and you can assist. And if you are in a medical profession, we would love for you to start praying about maybe what you can do on this mission trip. But there's a lot of great ways. You know, this is what I learned when I went on my mission trips. I thought I was going to help change lives. My life got changed. And if you've been on one, you know what I'm talking about. And if the Lord's laying something like that on your heart, Brandon last week mentioned about stepping out of your comfort zone and letting God stretch you a little bit. This is a great opportunity for that. So there's going to be an informational meeting about the Honduras trip. You're not committing to anything. If you just want to find out more about it, there's going to be an informational meeting right after this service in room 104 in our Family Life Center. Just head straight down the hallway, walk outside into the next room or next building, and 104 is right there. Just be a short meeting, and it'll give you all the details about that trip coming up. And even if you're not sure you want to go, start praying about it. See where the Lord leads. And start praying for others that maybe they want to do that as well. Brandon's going to continue his series about God, the God of the underdog, talking about the life of Gideon. And I'm sure there's a word for all of us in it today. We're glad that you guys are here. Thanks for coming.
Well, I do love the story of Gideon, which is where we've been the last several weeks. This is actually week 4, looking at this story. And the reason that I love Gideon so much is because, man, his story is so much like our story, which is that the calling that God has on your life is many times it's going to feel terrifying and uncomfortable and scary, and it feels like you don't have whatever you would need to be able to carry that out. But it's a story of God working in our life and providing and showing up, even in the midst of our fears, and even in the midst of our doubts. And the story of Gideon is so real and raw, and I just love it. And I'm encouraged, too, to know that, God has a calling for all of us, and it's not necessarily that we're all called to just, go crazy and sell everything and move halfway around the world and go be a missionary. We can't all be that. Some are called to that, but most often, man, our calling is just right where we are. It is right where you're planted. We talked about that last week a little bit, is do you sense the calling on your life? Does it validate other things that God is doing in your life? As you look and see, what is He already up to? Is it, and very often, what we do just right where we are, just looking around us, it starts right there. And we talk about people just in this church, the way that God uses people. It's incredible to make a difference in the lives of other people. I mean, from those that serve in children's ministry, pouring into kids. I mean, that's just such a great thing to do, just showing and sharing Jesus with some of our youngest people around here, those that serve in student ministry, or those that are small group leaders, or those that, help in some other way. I mean, we talk about Celebrate Recovery, making a difference there. They're leading small groups. They're preparing meals. They give a talk. They play in the band. All these different ways that they really and truly make a major difference in the life of someone else. And that's just right where we are. You may not know this. We have a group of people that prior to this service, they go downtown, and at about 9 o'clock in the morning on Sundays, they go downtown and they hold a church service for the homeless downtown. They do that, and then they come here and worship with us during this service. And, that's incredible ways. I mean, that's amazing to me. That's serving where you are. It's right where you're planted, looking around and seeing. And so we get to Gideon, and we're going to see that God's calling him just to make a difference where he is. Our newest staff member here is Heather Horn. She's our early childhood director. Her and her husband, JR, they serve as missionaries. But one of the things that they do that I love, they live just up the street from me. And they say, we just want to be very intentional about meeting our neighbors and getting to know our neighbors, which doesn't sound like a novel idea, but man, in the age of automatic garage door openers where you can roll up and hit the button and pull in the back cave, and it just comes zoop right down behind. You never have to talk to a soul or get to know anybody. We'll be walking around, taking the kids for a walk. They never use their backyard. They're always finding something to do in the front yard, and everybody that comes by, they make a point to, hey, how are you? Introduce themselves, and because they say we want to be able to share a little bit of our faith in Jesus with them and hopefully make a difference. I love at Halloween, they say, man, we kind of let our kids go trick-or-treating with their friends because they don't go trick-or-treating with their kids. They just set up in their driveway They put a fire pit out, and they have all these chairs, and they have like apple cider and different things. And everybody that passes by, they say, hey, come sit with us. Can we get you a drink? Can we get you this? Let the kids play a little bit. Because they say we want to be very, very intentional about ministering and the calling that God has right here, right in our own backyard. Or in their case, right in the front yard. But there's a really, that's where many of us are right now. I love this quote by there's a speaker and an author named Christine Kane. I just love her. She's really got some great stuff. But she has this quote. She says, our sense of calling should be like an unfolding epic adventure. Our sense of calling, I think I got that quote up on the screen. Our sense of calling should be like an unfolding epic adventure. I love that because I don't want my sense of calling to be boring and monotonous and predictable. You know, I want to be a part of something that's bigger than myself and feels like, I don't know where this is going to go, but I know it's going to go in a great direction. And that's what I love about that. So we got Gideon. God's calling him to raise up. He finds him. When we looked at the story, he's in a hole in the ground, kind of trying to protect what little food that he had from the enemies that had taken over their land. And God says, hey, mighty warrior, I want you to come up. I'm going to have you lead a group of warriors to take back the land and to save the people, to rescue them. And Gideon's got all kinds of fears and all kinds of doubts. We spent a couple weeks just looking at those, kind of that, hey, pardon me, but, I don't know about this. And, hey, last week was, hey, pardon me, but I'm the least. I'm the weakest. I'm a nobody. You got the wrong guy. And God's saying, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to take you there. We're going to do this together. And we're going to deal with a few verses today that I'll be honest with you. I've read these before, and just kind of touch and go and never really paid them any attention. And it's those kind of verses that, like, you can read them, and it's like, well, that's a little weird. I don't know what that exactly means, so you just skip on. But this week as I was preparing, I just realized there's so much depth in this. And I'm really excited to share it with you, what God kind of showed me this past week. But we'll pick it up in verse 25. So God has called him. He's had all the doubts. And Gideon said, well, if you just give me a sign, just give me something so that I know that it's you. And he brought the sacrifice out, and God set it on fire. And so he's like, oh, man, this is the real deal. And it says that same night, the Lord said to him, I want you to take the second bull from your father's herd, the one that's 7 years old. Go and tear down your father's altar to Baal and cut down the Asherah pole beside it. And in verse 26, he says, then I want you to build a proper kind of altar to the Lord your God on the top of this height. Using the wood of the Asherah pole that you cut down, I want you to take that wood, light it on fire, and offer the second bull as a burnt offering. So what's happening here? Again, this kind of what is this? I don't understand it. God is telling Gideon, I want you to go to your father's house. Literally, he says, I want you to go home. You're going to go back to where you're from, and there was an altar built there. It would have been this big, massive thing made of stone that they would have put sacrifices on or burned incense, things like that, as part of their idol worship. So they're worshiping these false gods. They use this altar to aid them in that. And next to that altar, there was this idol made out of wood called an Asherah pole. They would kind of worship it. I've got a picture kind of for a reference to show you what they kind of looked like. Kind of creepy looking. But that's what it was. And God told Gideon, the first thing I want you to do, as you are getting ready to step into this calling, I want you to first go home. And I want you to take care of business at home. There's a false god there, an idol, and there's an altar there that is to these false gods. I want you to go home first and tear it down. Wipe the slate clean. Let's get the foundation correct. And then you're going to build a proper altar on it and make a sacrifice to me. He's saying we're going to get things first. And when we're talking about calling and what God wants us to do, when you're ready to say yes, when you say, okay, I'm going to take the first step, I believe in what I see in Scripture is very often, you want to do that, the first thing God is going to call you to do, whether, whatever stage of life you're in, if you are single or you're married, parents, grandparents, husband, wife, it doesn't matter. Whatever stage of life that you're in, God is going to say to you first, I want you to have the courage to start at home. Go take care of business at home. Get your own house in order first. A lot of times we want to just run off and save the world. I see a problem out there, and so I'm going to go and just make a difference over there when God's saying, that's great, and we're going to get there. But first, I need you to start home. I need you to go home and get your own house in order. Have the courage. Isn't it interesting? I think it's interesting that that's the first thing God tells Gideon to do. Go home. Go to your father's house. I think it just seems that it is easier to wage battles against strange enemies than it is to deal with the problems that are right here. When it's so personal. When the mission is so personal, it just seems like it is so much more difficult. The stakes are so much higher. I was at a leadership conference several years ago, and one of the speakers said something that I thought was really powerful. I wrote it down so I'd remember it. They said that courage calls us to confront and push, even when everything inside of us beckons us away from it. When it would be a lot easier to say, hey, we got this elephant in the room. Let's just ignore the elephant, Whatever that issue is, let's let sleeping dogs lie. Let's ignore the problem, sweep it under the rug. Let's not talk about it or deal with it. Don't want to drudge that up again. And yet courage calls us to not only confront, but to push. Confront and push, even when everything inside of us would rather ignore it, would rather go away and pretend that it's not there. It takes courage to start at home. It's tough when the battle is in your own house. And when you got to get your own house in order. But Christ-centered families, those that are focused on Jesus, they have this type of bravery. They don't shy away or back away from these types of wars. In Matthew chapter 7, Jesus gave this teaching. You probably may be somewhat familiar with it. He says, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, and you want to try to help him out with that, but you pay no attention to the 2x4 you got sticking out of your own face? Why are you? He says, how can you say to your brother, let me take care of that speck. Let me take that speck out of your eye when the whole time there's a plank in your own eye. He says, listen, this is hypocritical. This is hypocritical. First, you got to take the plank out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly enough to help your brother remove the speck from his eye. Before we run off and make a difference somewhere else, I believe that God says, hey, go home. Start there. If you've got a problem at home, if you're not as close to the Lord as you know that you want to be, take care of that. We've got shortcomings. We've got issues. Let's start there. All right, we've got a marriage that's fallen apart. There's a good place to begin. If your kids aren't right with God, there's something to begin praying about. There's something to begin pouring into. It's hard to try to help someone else when everything's falling apart at home. If the house is on fire, I can't really go help the neighbors cook dinner. I got to take care of business first. So God is telling Gideon, let's get everything straightened out at home. Let's tear those old idols down. Get rid of that altar. Get rid of that wooden idol and build a proper altar there for me. Let's get the foundation right. And that makes me think, I know that God's calling all of us to something. I know that God's calling you to something. But it begs the question, what are the idols that you have at home that need to come down? Because you know what an idol is. An idol is anything that takes the place of God in your life. Anything that would edge him out or take priority. That's an idol. So what are the sacred cows? What are the elephants in the room? What are the things that you give yourself to and your priority and your resources and your life? You're giving yourself to this, and it's slipped in place of God. What are they that they need to come down? Maybe for some of us, It could be something that we look as a positive thing. At least in our culture, we kind of elevate this and make it seem like it's a good thing, but it could be workaholism. You know what I mean? It's one thing to work and take care of your family. We need to do that. We need to be about that. But it's easy to take that to a really, really unhealthy level really quickly. And we can put work and our work and what we're doing and trying to earn as much as we can. I'm working 60, 70 hours a week. You know, I'm trying to get every hour that I possibly can because why? Oh, I just want to be a hard worker. And we let that edge out our relationship with God. There could be pride, you know, a sense of pride. It could be pornography. You know, it's kind of something we don't want to talk about. We kind of pretend it's not there. But behind closed doors, we know that there's an issue. Maybe it is addiction of some sort. Maybe for some of us, I mean, this seems benign, but it could be just a screen addiction. It's like, oh, you know, I just love my TV show. You know, I just love getting on social media. I just love my cell phone. But it's gotten to the point that I can't function without it. You know, it's really creeped into this whole other creepy level that's just consuming so much of me, and it's edged out my relationship with God because I gotta be online. I gotta be online. Is there something that's causing your marriage to crumble? Is there something that's causing your kids to rebel? We can't ignore the 2x4s in our own eyes to run off and make a difference somewhere else. We gotta deal with what's at home. Start there. I remember years ago, my father-in-law was talking to me. This is right before Megan and I got married. And my father-in-law, he's a pastor, and really gracious guy, really kind-hearted. And he told me one day, he says, listen, Brandon, there's one thing that I want you to know. He says, you're going to hear a lot of other pastors kind of say this and do this, and you're going to see this a lot where it's kind of this idea, if you're a pastor, the church comes first. You know, and the family comes second. And that sounds like really honorable. You know, on the surface, it sounds really noble because, oh, man, we put the church, we put, you know, the needs of the church above even my own needs, even my own family's needs. He says, you're going to hear a lot of that. He said, but I want you to remember that God established the family before he established the church. Keep it in that order. And for us, all of us, it's easy to let good things take the place of great things. And when it comes to our relationship with Christ, we got to be really cautious and really intentional about how does that all line up and what's first place in our life. And so we got to keep the priorities in check. In verse 27, so God has said, Gideon, I want you to go home and tear these things down. It says that Gideon took 10 of his servants, and he did as the Lord told him. But because he was afraid. Can we put that scripture up on the screen? Because he was afraid of his family, and he was afraid of the townspeople, he did it at night rather than at the daytime. Which again is why I love Gideon. I mean, there's the fear again. He's still, even though God has shown up and he's given him these instructions and he's confirmed it with him, Gideon is still operating with a little bit of fear. So it's okay. You know, I think that Gideon may have missed out on something here. I think God probably would have shown up and done some miraculous thing if Gideon had done it during the day and caused a stir, you know, while everybody could see it. But it's just encouraging to me because I wish I could say I've got perfect faith all the time. You know, I wish that I could say that anytime God's called me to something that I'm like, yep, I heard it, I got it, no question, no doubt, you know, I'm going to start walking right now, and I wish that I could say that. I wish that I could say that I don't shake like a leaf and want to throw up all over the place, you know. But the truth is that sometimes I find myself stumbling towards God. And for me, that really sums up a lot of my faith journey. There are times that I can walk and take a few steps, and there's a lot of times I'm crawling on my stomach and just like, God, I'm trying to be faithful. I want to move towards you, but it is scary. And I know that God knows he's asking Gideon to do some pretty big stuff here. And he sees the fear. It says in verse 28 that in the morning, when the people got up, so Gideon's torn the altars down, he's built a new one to God. It says when they got up, there it was. There was Baal's altar demolished with the Asherah pole beside it cut down and the second bull sacrificed on the newly built altar. And it says that they asked each other in verse 29, who did this? And when they carefully investigated, they were told Oh, it was Gideon. Gideon did it. And so what happens next in this account is the people, they got together with Gideon's father. And they said, hey, go get Gideon, find him wherever he is, and bring him out here so that we can kill him. He never should have done this. He's torn down these things that we love, we worship. You know, it's our gods. He's destroyed it. Go get him, bring him out here so that we can kill him. And basically, Gideon's father says, hey, that's not a good idea. Let's not do that. He says, if Baal is really a god, then let's let Baal defend himself. And then there's this little passage in verse 32. It's so easy to miss, so easy to look over this. But here's what it says. It says that so because Gideon broke down Baal's altar, they gave him the name Jerubbaal that day, saying, let Baal contend with him. They literally changed his name. He's not called Gideon anymore. So from now on they call him Jerubbaal, which translated it means Baal fighter, or the one who contends with Baal. Now why is that important? It struck me last week because when you step out into your calling, it changes who you are. You are not the same person anymore. Your calling changes your identity when you step into it. You cannot stay where you are and go with God. You can't be walking in your calling and go back and do the same things that you used to do and go the same places that you used to go and be the same person that you used to be. You're different. You're called into something new and different and to accomplish God's purposes in his ways. And for Gideon, he's a totally different dude now. Because you got to think, so he grew up in this culture. He grew up in this community of people. They all knew each other. And they knew him. I mean, there's old ladies there that had known little Gideon from down the street. They'd put his diapers on, and when he scraped his knees, they'd, kissed his boo-boos and all this stuff. They'd seen him play. He had these buddies that he grew up with, and they'd all run around together and play and hang out. And as he grew and was a teenager, his friends and his parents and all the people in the community, they knew Gideon, little Gideon down the street. Just a good old boy down the road. And then he does this. He's gone and he's torn down something that was so sacred and so special and so loved to these people. It was their God. It was these false idols, this false altar. It was a well-known place in a highly visible location. From that point on, Gideon is now, well, that's the kid that tore down the God. He tore down our altar. Yeah, I love my grandpa helped build that altar. I used to love going by. It's such a great place. I'd go and I'd say a few prayers. It's so peaceful. Helped me feel better about myself. It's such a nice place. And Gideon went and he just ruined it. He just destroyed the whole thing, this place that we love to go and we love to worship there and talk about our gods and all of our stuff. And Gideon just comes and destroys it. You see, he's a different person now. He's thrown down the gauntlet. He's made a statement. He's peed in the Cheerios right now. I mean, he's not the same person anymore. They don't see him as little Gideon down the street. Now he's the Baal fighter. And what I think is interesting, he cuts down that wooden altar or the wooden idol, and God says, I want you to use the wood from that, and I want you to burn it. Burn this sacrifice to me on it. And literally through the ashes of that broken down altar, God was glorified. What are the idols in your life that need to come crashing down and burning? God's going to be glorified through that. He's going to be glorified through you bringing those down. And you think, well, Gideon's finally past all the fear now, right? He's all the pardon me's and all the, well, if you could give me a sign, and well, I'm the least and the weakest and all, and God's saying, I'm going to be with you, I'm going to be with you, it's going to be okay. I'm going to, I'm telling you, I'm here. He tears down the altar. What does he do next? He says, one more thing, God. Just one more. He's still got some doubts. In verse 36, it says, Gideon said to God, it says, if you will save Israel by my hand as you've promised, he says, look, I will place a wool fleece on the ground, on the threshing floor. And in the morning, if there is only dew on the fleece and the rest of the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you have said. So verse 38, this says, and that is what happened. Gideon rose the next day. He squeezed the fleece and he wrung out the dew, a bowl full of water. That's pretty cool, right? You think, okay, he's ready to go. He's good to go, right? What's he do next? Verse 39. Then Gideon says to God, don't be angry with me. Can I have one more test? I love Gideon. Man, I relate to that. You know, can you just one more time? I mean, just one more time. I had somebody after first service said, you know, I never realized this, but you think about it. Gideon is probably the first person in the Bible that was able to hear God audibly make this noise. Just one more test, God. Just one more. And then if you just give me one more, then I'm going to trust you. He says, allow me one more test with the fleece. But this time, make the fleece dry and the rest of the ground be covered with dew. Verse 40, that night God did so. Only the fleece was dry. All the ground was covered with dew. Now, you know what I don't see there? You know, it's interesting to me. Sometimes when God speaks to me through His Word, sometimes it's what I don't see that I would expect to see. You know what I don't see there? I don't see God lighting him up and saying, how many times do I need to tell you? You know, you parents, how many, you said that thing, that you've said that to your kids. You know, how many times I've told you 1,000 times to do this? I don't see God saying, you know, what's wrong with you, you weak little scaredy cat? I have shown you, and I have told you, and I have confirmed it, and I have lit your sacrifice. I mean, what else? How many times are you going to question? How many more times are you going to doubt? I don't see any of that. You know what I do see? Grace. Patience. I see God working with a man who is stumbling towards him. He's saying, sure, we'll do the fleece thing. Sure, bring your sacrifice. I'll wait. Yeah, let's do the fleece thing again. You know, what next? God is so patient with him, so gracious with him. It's okay, my friends, if you feel like you're just crawling right now. I used to think that God was waiting to smack me upside the head. And I've realized, you know, as I've grown in my relationship, that if I'm crawling, if I'm stumbling, he's just saying, hey, keep coming towards me. I'll walk beside you. I want to read you this letter that I found this past week from a guy named Adam. He says, in early May 2014, life was good. My wife and I had been married for 6 great years, and we had 2 wonderful little girls. Our oldest was 3 then, and our youngest was just 10 months. And our lives were so simple and smooth. Working in our family business and raising our 2 girls. And that all changed before the month was out when our 10-month-old daughter contracted a rare infection that after 5 days in Cincinnati Children's Hospital took her life. And our lives were shattered. Our perfect lives gone in a blink. And we were lost. A few months later, living in the heavy fog of loss and fear, we got pregnant again. The baby following the loss of a child is often called a rainbow baby. It really seemed like the clouds had parted a little bit to allow this rainbow to peek through, but as quickly as they parted, they closed again when we had a miscarriage. And as the year drew to a close, we struggled again, this new pain, when our family business caught on fire. Now, it was nothing compared to the loss of our children, but the strain was enormous. And I was in the darkest place of my entire life. I struggled. Fear and doubt were consuming me. Did I do something that had caused my daughter's death? Would this pain destroy my marriage? Would the rest of my life be miserable? I just kept being consumed and angry. Angry at the doctors, angry at the nurses, angry at just about anybody who should have saved my daughter, even God, and especially God. I had a friend invite me to church, and eventually I went. I mostly just sat in that loud, dark space and cried my way through the service. And once there was this guy standing up during worship with his hands in the air. Man, did that tick me off. How could he believe that God was so good? But at the same time, I wanted to just go touch his shoulder so that I might just have a glimpse of what he was feeling. I was so confused. But then over time, these people showed me who Jesus is. The people in that church helped remove all that weight, and it was replaced by what felt like courage straight from God. And my life was changed forever. He says, my journey is far from over. But without this experience, it's hard telling where I would be. No one is meant to carry that weight on their own. It was crushing me. He says, I still struggle a lot with losing my baby girl. It's still confusing, and it hurts so bad. But now my hope is in Jesus. I originally thought that my ultimate goal was to squeak by and get into heaven just by the skin of my teeth, just so that I could see my daughter again. I don't know how it all works, but one thing I know is now my eyes are focused solely on Him. Just stand with me. Let's sing this together.
I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you have required. You search much deeper within through the way things appear. You're looking into my heart. I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus. I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I've made it, and it's all about you. It's all about you, Jesus.
So keep stumbling, my friends. Keep stumbling. Keep searching. Keep trusting. Keep striving. Keep asking. Keep searching. What does God want from me? Stumble away. Have the courage to start right here. Start right here with you. Have the courage to say that when I leave here today, I'm going to go home and there are issues there, there are idols there, there are things that are going to come down so that I can pursue God's call for me. You're going to find a God who is full of grace and patience and who loves and longs to come alongside you even when you're stumbling. Let's make this our song of worship to Him today. If you need somebody to talk to, our Next Step team is going to be right in the foyer. Swing by and talk to somebody. Let them pray with you before you leave today. But let's make this our prayer, our anthem. Let's raise our voices as loud as we can and fill this house with the praise of our God.
It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. It's all about you. Yeah, it's all about you. It's all about all about you, Jesus.
Father, give us the courage to pursue you today. Lord, we're thankful for the ways in which you stepped in.